Well, welcome everyone. I know we'll probably still have folks trickling in over the lunch hour, but we want to really maximize our time that we have here with Professor Macon. This is the second of our monthly AI series where we're learning about our AI partner as a collaborative tool. And so I'm just going to turn it right over to you, David.
Thank you. So I guess we should start with the email that John sent out. Yes, yes, please do download those files. I figure it would be easier than using our own courses. You might not feel comfortable sharing some of what you might find, or maybe you do. I want the next workshop to really be where you bring some of your materials, and then we'll just work through it. Today was more of a reflection of what I was able to learn from speaking with many of you on, it'd be really helpful, like just walk me through it, right? Like, it's great we have all these tools, but ultimately I need something that's structured, right? Like, tell me where to go, what to do, and what I should be looking for. Yes, thank you. Those are just, I downloaded an open course from MIT, and I downloaded it in something I knew nothing about. So it is on molecular genetics. I thought we could have some fun with it. Also, it is from 2011. So it's a really great opportunity to just test some of the tools, to ask what has happened since then. So it's kind of the plan today. And then at the end, we'll talk about just some, weird to say, homework from a workshop. Just some things to be thinking about, because I really would like folks to come back and just report out some of your experiences. I've been watching a lot of, I think that's what you do, right? You're just watching a lot of videos. And now my workout playlist has really become just AI talks. And I got to watch the one on the Khan Academy and what they're building. And, they're building it based on a RAG application, and it's really fine-tuned, right? And watching the presentation, it really made me think about how all of these tools are thinking, what will this look like? And I say tools because that's how they're often viewed, right? They are tools. But they envision a world where every student has a tutor with these tools, and then he added something that I thought was really powerful, was that every teacher has a teaching assistant, right? And that's what we're going to talk about today is, how to build a teaching assistant, some ways that you can use it that are concrete. Right? Last month, we talked a lot about all these different tools and all the things they could do. But one of the things that I was left with that folks reminded us, like, give me something concrete, David, like something that I can go and I can do. So that's today. So I'll just get this shared out, and then we can kind of dive in here. So here we go. And hopefully we will not have those same artifacts that we ran into last time. If so, oh, look at that. Looks like they're gone. Okay. So the first thing, just sending some general, there we go, goals here, right? One of the things we know about pedagogy is if you go into it thinking that there's something wrong, we're less likely to find our negative patterns, right? And you know the constraints, so we'll talk a little bit more about those later. And you know that you have really good lessons, right? I guarantee every single person here has that one thing, right? There's probably lots of them, but that one thing it's either an announcement that's great, an in-person activity. So I just want to pause here for those of you that are here that are comfortable sharing, like, what is that one thing that your students get when you do it this way? There's got to be one out there. I'm trying to figure out, how do I unmute? Are you tracking chat?
Yeah, I'm tracking chat. I don't see anything in chat. Okay. You can contribute via chat. You can unmute and share your ideas.
Oh, they're probably eating lunch. I got to give credit to that. They're eating lunch too. So I'll give you an example. So my students really struggle when we are talking about how we, oh, there we go. Is it fine? Okay. Can you hear Dave? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was like, They really struggle when we're talking about how do we calculate the cost of crime, right? And so I have this activity where, we go through all these different types of crime and they write up what they estimate it would be. And then we talk about tangible and intangible and court costs and long-term costs. And as we do this whole activity, it comes back to why would we do this in the first place? Like, why is it important to be able to calculate this? And we go through this whole activity and they get it, right? It's like the whole idea is we need to calculate this if we're going to do cost benefit analysis, if we're going to think about staffing needs, right? Like, not all crime is created equal. But it's a great way to walk them through how do you operationalize something that people imperfectly measure, right? And then how do you calculate something that's intangible, right? Like, I can calculate how much time it takes of a prosecutor or a defense attorney's time or an investigator, but how do you calculate something that's intangible? What do we do? How is the field approach that? So identify something that you are really good at, right? And then we're going to build this AI assistant to really highlight the excellence that you've already demonstrated to be able to build from that. So again, not focusing on what we might not do well, but instead thinking about, okay, I know that I do this really well, and this is what I want to be able to integrate and build upon. So focus on successful lessons, right? Find an assignment that you did really well, your students get, or find a concept, right? Something that they struggle with understanding that that you do well from any given meeting, right? It can be an announcement, lecture notes, presentation, anything, right? And so we're going to use our teaching assistant to help us take those successful lessons and those activities and find where else we might be able to leverage them. So to that end, this is our this is kind of how we're going to do our first exercise. This is something that I would like as many of you to do. I'll share my screen and we'll kind of walk through it. But the idea is you have MIT's open course. And if not, it was sent out.
Yep.
John sent it out.
Yep.
And it's the entire course. It's solutions, exams, it's lecture notes, it's illustrations. Let's see, it has a transcript of video. So it's essentially as multimodal as possible. It takes all of the potential ways and then brings them in so that you have a complete course. And so I wanted something that I knew not a lot about. So it was kind of like if I needed a teaching assistant, if I had to somehow, for whatever reason, they were like, David, you got to come teach this. Like, how could I, have this teaching assistant and a student that I could, a simulated student to help me prepare and build out something that's more engaging, ultimately that improves what I'd like to think is assessment. So I want to take about 15 minutes and I'll make sure I kind of get a timer here. And what I want you to do is, let's see, I've got to hide this.
Set a timer.
Thank you.
Just tell me when you're ready.
I need to hide the controls. So we're going to switch over here. So what I've done is I've loaded the entire course. It's everything. And again, really easy. You just go to add, drag and drop in there. Get that out of the way there, right? You also have the ability to go in and discover more sources, right? So again, remember, this is from 2011. And I will imagine that there has been a lot of change in this field. And that might be something that we want to start with. So it's real easy. Again, you drag and drop the files in. It takes a moment to update all of the sources. And so this is, you can see, this is the entire course.
I'm just.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, so all of those are in there. And so you see there's 138 sources that are loaded. And this is the overview that's created, right? And so then I ask, because I was like, all right, let's see. The first thing I'm going to ask is, hey, this course is from 2011, right? What has changed? And then what it does is just what you would think. It goes through and talks about, hey, here's what's currently there. Here's a really strong foundation. And then here are the elements right here, the revolution in DNA, speed and scale, next generation sequencing and beyond, right? The power of PCR. And you're not just getting, here's what I know to be, here's all of the references and resources, again, that I can follow up with. I can ask even more questions about it. And that's just a very basic, here's the entire course. And now here's, right, what I'm interested in is get me caught up to speed, right? And then from this, if you go back to the slides, again, it's all the things that they're looking at. And you'll notice if you're doing this and you ask that question, it's also going to align with what's currently being discussed, how you discuss it, right? And you'll see right here, right? However, so on alternative splicing dynamics, right? And it says, this is what's been updated, right? And then the instructor notes, right? Here's the way you're currently framing it. And now here's this perfect opportunity to leverage this part of the lecture, right? And then connect it and bridge to what is current, right? So you get that wonderful juxtaposition between here's the foundation and here's where we're currently at. Now from this, if you're saying, okay, well, what do I want to do with this? We could generate just a mind map of these, updated topics that align with the lecture, right? So given this topic, here's, what's new, some of what is new. It's not everything. Now, we can build out that mind map, right? But now let's go back to just a couple of these questions, right? So let's look at the first, because it's so much easier to copy than it is to type it out, right? So we're going to just look at pedagogical strategies, right? So we're going to stay inside of what we're current chat, right? We're not going to change that. And we're just going to look at here. Now I'll show you also how to set this up, because there's some changes that you can make. So it's going to think a bit, and then it's going to start breaking down. Again, it's focused on the specific content that we've loaded. So all 138 sources, right? And it's just going to start going through those and finding all those opportunities, right? Where in the material, what are effective practices? And there's a lot that's here, right? Now, this can be a little overwhelming, right? That's a lot to sit down and read through, right? So one of the things that's really nice about the way that they have this is you can configure your chat, right? So if you want it to have a conversation, which is all helping you learn, you turn on the learning guide, and it's going to think of you as a learner, and it's going to work with the material in that way. What I did is I wanted to build, and I said, look, I want you to act as my teaching assistant who has reviewed all my material, right? And you're noticing patterns that I haven't seen myself, right? I want you to find those patterns. I want you to be supportive, but honest, right? And that you're willing to tell me what I might be missing, right? And then I added in there, I want you to also focus on engaging and inspiring students to think how the course material connects to their world, right? To make it relevant to them, right? To ground it, right? So you have the ability to customize it. And then you can go with, well, how much content, right? Like, do I want a very verbose, or do I want something? And I want something a little shorter. Now think of this for a moment. What you saw was the shorter version, right? Kind of think of it as the cliff notes of sorts. But as you get these insights into, okay, well, what's really successful about this material, right? And, it starts with the engineering mindset, right? Right. That, having spent some time going through the course and chatting about this, that is one of the things that comes up consistently, is teaching students to think through the scientific method, to think of themselves as engineers, and how do you approach these given problems, right? And how it's reinforced in these ways. Now, I don't know as much about the content. Now, imagine if you are an expert on this content, your ability to go through this and pick up on what are, really good practices, where you might be able to do something slightly different, to be able to engage different populations of students. Again, this is high level. This is, here's my material. I want you to first help me identify what I'm doing that's really successful, given the frame that we give it is focusing on pedagogy, right? Which is focusing on course structure, looking at the way in which I'm assessing students. Again, and if you ever look at this and you're kind of overwhelmed, you're going, I'm not quite certain what I should focus on. We can just do that, and we can ask something as, this is a wonderful material. Focus on 2, 3. So we're just going to say, look, I can't do all of that, right? My course is already full, right? Where am I supposed to, get all of this in there? So let's just ask, right? Let's figure out what have we been discussing we might be able to bring in. And so it's going to give me, if space permits, these are some of the others, but it's going to start with, let me try this. Oh, no, I was going to try to get more of the space here. There we go. Let's collapse it. There we go. So we can go back up. There we go. So one of the things I have to do a lot better on is just helping you get back to exactly where you're at, right? So it looks at, again, here's what the original course has. This is the foundational methods, right? So I would focus on this particular item and not just, again, remember, we've asked it to be our teaching assistant. We've directly framed exactly what our expectations are as the teaching assistant. And so then it comes back with, why should you do that? Remember, because that's what I asked for, right? I don't want you to just tell me, right, this information. I want you to put it through this particular lens. And so it's saying, well, here are, why I believe, right, given this content, given what's updated in the field, this is what I would emphasize, right? And we can continue this activity by, that same back and forth, which is saying, okay, I understand that, but now given these constraints, right? And so you think about, let's just do the classic one, which is set up as a talk and chalk pedagogy students. All right, so let's give it the classic challenge, which is how in the world do you do think, pair, share in a large lecture hall, right? Like, how would that even work, right? So again, we've now first started with what's new. Second, we've tapped into what do I do really well in this course, right? And then we've narrowed it down to say, okay, of these, where should I put my emphasis, right? Again, these are the things I'm really good at, right? And then it comes up with some helpful ideas for us, right? Since we know that we've done really well, and one of the recommendations was lean into the engineering biologists, right? Like, that's what the course really does well. It gets students to see this and see themselves in a different way, right? And then it's saying, okay, well, here's an activity that we could do, right? You have a wonderful opportunity in your lecture where you're covering all this material to do this particular. So it's telling me where this might work really well. And then it's giving me a particular prompt that I might be able to provide. And then it's giving me, this is kind of the answer that we would expect. Now, we can continue to iterate on this to find something that aligns really well to just kind of your style or the examples or even your own research to be able to then add that personal touch. In my research, I've explored this. So let me show you how this we're talking about connects to this research that's being done. A really helpful way of thinking about, I have all this other material. I like to do this with my supplemental material. students even, they don't read it. I mean, they're like, it's supplemental, Dr. Macon. I go, but I put it there for a reason. They should have made it required. And he's like, yeah, but probably still wouldn't read it because it's a lot. But what a great way to take the supplemental readings, right, that you want them to know a little bit more about and then bring those directly in, right? So again, it's just trying to ensure that you're showing them why this course matters to them, right? And again, I can directly say, okay, well, I like this idea, right? So let's go ahead and create an activity out of it, right? Or we could do something like, let's say, well, we could create the video overview. So let's go ahead and just start that, right? Well, I'm going to clear this real quick because I want a video over. Well, it's fine. So we could clear this all out. We could build an assignment and then have the video overview focus on the assignment so students could watch it, right? And so one of the things I've thought about using this is we could have that up there playing as it's describing what I would like students to do, right? And I can kind of keep it on a loop as going through, and then I can walk around and talk to students, right? While they're being guided through something. So I can focus my time on helping those that need it in the immediate, while everyone else is able to just watch and listen and follow through, right? In some ways, it's like, it's we call a force multiplier. It's a weird thing, but that's typically how we think of it, right? I can't be everywhere, but I can have these different content pieces available to students so that they can watch them on their laptop as they go through. I can present the audio overviews, the mind maps, anything that I'm working on here, right? I have the ability to transform into any of these other concepts. Okay. Right. So this is the, right, identify what works, right? So we can, again, the idea was juxtaposed to your particular assignments, right? So that was the idea of your successful lesson assignments, right? And then this is, okay, well, let's think about, I know the good one, because this one has almost all multiple choice exams. So let's just do the classic, right? Which is, how do we manage that? So,
David, while you're doing this, when you pressed mind map earlier and you did video overview, then where does it show up? So
yep.
Oh, down there. There. Okay.
So if I hit video overview, it's just going to go ahead and start, and it's going to start building it. But if we go back here to the foundational concepts, right?
That's where, okay.
Right. It's all right here, but this is the one thing well, there's lots of things I like about this, but it allows us to keep building this out. And you'll notice that the chat switches and we can keep building out all of these concepts. And so the deeper that I build this out, right, it allows me to then be able to use this to create all those other types of resources.
And then when it's got a thumbs up and a thumbs down at the bottom, good content, bad content. Is that like feedback to the?
Yes, it is. It's model feedback. All right. So yeah, I think we have a tendency of just not engaging with it. But you think if we want to have better material, right? If we want to have better accuracy, better content, well, in some part we are training these tools as well, right? So the ability to say, hey, that's good, right? I really like that particular output that you generated. So, all right, we've got all that. We can just close that down, and it's still building the video. So let's just do the classic, right? Which is, let's see, one of the things I know about my course is that I rely on almost always, I guess almost, no, it's fine. We're just going to keep it almost always multiple choice. Okay. So we're at the classic, right? It's like, here, I almost always use multiple choice exams. I think it's something that we've all had to do, right? And so I'm not looking for brand new assessments, right? What I'm looking for are, again, those low risk, high impact, right? So not exams, not essays, right? I'm looking for something that I can engage my students with. And what it's able to do is say, okay, here are, again, we've already started with what am I good at, right? Where, what are the strengths of my approach to this course? This is okay, well, let's lean into this. It's not just about memorizing terms, because the way that my lecture is framed, and when you go through this, you see it so clearly, particularly the transcripts of the professor's lectures. I mean, they are really good. I mean, it's really about helping the students understand why this material matters. So again, if we know this is what they're really good at, well, then let's create some assignments behind it, right? So we could do some problem solving, right? Low risk, short answer quizzes. Okay. But what if I don't like the quiz approach, right? And I can just ask that. I can say, well, I'm looking for this type of assignment. And so again, it's not taking the first thing that comes, it's taking the time to look this over and figure out, okay, this seems reasonable, or here's how I'd like to change it, or what about this, right? Again, thinking about this as your teaching assistant, that opportunity to say, if we think about why we want teaching assistants, and the first thing we got to get rid of, let's just set it aside, is grading papers, right? What else would you like to have your teaching assistant be able to do, right? Maybe I'd like them to be able to create study guides. I can have this teaching assistant to create a study guide, right? Flashcards, low risk quizzes that we can hand out where it's, look, we just talked about this in class, and I'm going to give everyone this quiz to just check if everybody understands it. And again, this is low risk, right? This isn't a 30-year grade. This is a knowledge check, right? If I have to sit down and create all of these, it's going to take me a fair amount of time, right? And this is in part, yes, it has to be about efficiency, but it's about being able to be effective at what we do. If I know I do really well in these areas, I know that there's some gaps. I know now that these are some pathways forward. Now I'm starting to be able to kind of narrow and tailor to exactly what my use case is. Okay. And as y'all have questions, please do ask. I feel like, did we hit that time, John?
We did.
Okay. Does anyone that was able to do this want to share out anything that they found? Well, if not, they might be eating their lunch still. Okay. So what we just did is the core AI functions, right? We talked about these before, things that large language models are really good at, right? And it's all of those. Pattern analysis, right? It's like, why do students succeed with this particular assignment, right? So we could flip it around and we could say, why do students, question, teach discussion seminars. Oh, I like that. Okay. The discussion seminars. I like that. We are going to get there. So we're going to get to the next part of the teaching assistant, right? So again, we can always focus on, right? Like, students don't do well here. Help me figure out why. And I think there's still a time and a place for that, right? But I'd also encourage you to flip it around to figure out, why are students doing so well here, right? What within the way I'm structuring my course or my materials, right? Where do you think I'm explaining really well? Start there, right? Because I think we're much more likely to engage with material, right? Or even to make changes when we're thinking about, I'm trying to adapt what I'm really good at, right? Same thing with pattern transfer, same thing for gap identification, right? So in this case, the first thing we started with was, since this was created in 2011, what am I missing, right? So identify the gap, then review the course and find where I'm effective and where I think I'm effective, and then be able to bring those two together to create something that's a little bit different, right? And so it's that gap identification, the pattern analysis, and then we get that pattern transfer. Okay. So next part of this, right, is really, this came about, as I mentioned, I was watching that Khan Academy where they said, every student is going to have a tutor, and then, every teacher is going to have an AI teaching assistant. And I thought, well, why can't I just have both, right? In this case, we've already spent time identifying the strengths, but what if I change it ever so slightly and I introduce what we all know to be true, right? And so I just took practical challenges that students have, right? It's like, look, I have 2 hours before a deadline. What am I going to focus on? Because again, we know these are our students, right? Hey, I'm going through all the lecture notes. I really don't know what I need to take away. And I know we want them to be able to figure that out. This is for you. I know that my students are going to do these things. I know what they're going to Google, right, instead of reading. I already know these things. So if I already know the student perspective, why can't I feed that in and say, okay, given these characteristics, and what can I do, right? And that's all I've done here. I've said the first part, we've identified our strengths, right? We've identified some gaps. Then we're going to introduce the student perspective, right? I have X amount of time. Here are my conditions. Hey, I'm looking at all these concepts and I just don't know how they all connect. I'm really struggling here. So you bring all of that in, but I'm also looking for a little critique, right? I want to anticipate where my students get lost, right? Where might they simply see a section and go, oh, this is way too much, right? So I have the ability to have a student, to create multiple students, because I can set the characteristics of them. I can say that, I can create the type of student that I want to anticipate and prepare for, right? The student that is working full-time, taking a full load, and really needs that high level. They're a great student, but they just need to know, tell me these are the things I need to read, and I'm going to read them, right? The student that might struggle with math, because one of the key parts of this course that I found out by just having a conversation is that it's very math heavy at times, right? So if I start with, hey, I have there's this student who's isn't as strong as math as they could be, but they're learning, they're willing to learn, right? They've got that growth mindset. There's my student. How might I be able to adapt some of my lesson materials, right? Or the student, like, you have the ability to think through, and this can be used to anticipate, right? So first, here's what I do really well. Let's introduce some student perspectives. And now let's think through, what do I do about those, right? We're doing really well on time, right? So here are just some of the ways. Actually, I did want to talk about these. As I was doing this, I spent like 3 weeks going back and forth because it was like, sometimes it would work really well. Other times I was like, I don't know what happened. So I put down there in the very bottom, sometimes it's okay to just delete everything and start over. Sometimes you have to. Things that I found that work really well, and I didn't do this for you all because part of this was you all going through and doing it yourself, putting it back in there and going, wow, it works so much better, is take exams and label them exams, right? Lecture notes, presentations, of course, right? Like, label your materials. It helps out so much when you're trying to do these types of activities. Yes, you can let it try to figure out, but there's 138 documents, right, that I had loaded. So one of the things I asked was, if I need to rename all these, given context, tell me what the name should be. And I got all the names. And I was like, all right. Then I have a program that I just drag the files in. I put the list of names in, pair it through, and it renames all of them, and there we go, right? Let's say Bob's your uncle, right? And you're going, I don't know how to do that. Yes, you do. You can sit down with a tool, right? You could sit down with AI Studio and just start by building a tool. Say, I want to rename files. But like, we have to be willing to have the same type of growth mindset if we're going to expect our students to, right? And so whenever you hit a roadblock and say, well, I don't know how to do this, well, you have someone who can coach you through doing that, right? And like, I've never written a help desk. Well, for my project, we needed a help desk. All the developers were busy. And so I was able to start and say, look, I know how to write in Python. I'm pretty decent at it. I've never worked in React. How can I go about this? I need help. And I was able to build our entire help desk, right, from scratch, because I accepted that there's resources that are out there that could help me improve, right? So you have, it's not just put the material in, you're going to get back every time everything you're looking for. There is a fair amount, just like if you were sitting down with a colleague and looking over your materials, right? So being able to label everything, get that structure, again, set boundaries, right? And so these are some things that I realized, all right, well, let's look at it in pieces as opposed to the entire course, right? Let's look at how we can improve the diagrams, right? That's the whole idea here, okay? Through here. Okay, so based on that activity, here are some of the things.
Is it possible to conduct pattern analysis by comparing materials from MIT OpenCourse and any other classes, such as design studio classes?
I think absolutely. You could put them, that's actually part of the activity I want folks to do, is take your materials and bring them in and see, how you might align or where you differ. I think it's really fascinating to be able to take, especially things that are very disciplinary different, right? And just find the patterns that are there.
I also wonder, this is such an insightful question that they're posing, because I also wonder about faculty who teach different sections of the same course, or if, I've been teaching the course for 5 years and then I pass it on to someone else who teaches. The NotebookLM could then help us identify where things overlap, where we're diverging, and also potentially help us see where the good, really promising stuff is from multiple instructors that are teaching together.
Oh yeah, standardize it in some ways, right? It's like where are we consistently focusing on, right? And that's our core. And then we're thinking about what is disciplinary specific to the way that you teach that course and things that you think are valuable. You're only limited by, here's all that I can put in, the types of prompts that you write. Again, what are you looking for, right? So if we, part of this was, again, folks going through and doing this. This is kind of just a synthesis of what I was able to find as I was doing this activity myself, right? And it did identify places where scaffolding could be better, right? And then gave suggestions to say, again, put the limitations on. I don't have the ability to add more. So where can I better synthesize to integrate these other course topics into the course, right? I think that's the real power. Is it's not simply adding more and more and more. We are always going to be resource constrained. We're always going to be space limited. We have to accept these things to be true. So using this to work within those constraints to figure out, okay, here's how I might be able to do this. It picked up on directly, hey, you only have one way that this course is being assessed, right? That's going to benefit these types of students, right? And it's not going to really benefit the students that learn in this way. And they understand the concepts, but they can't memorize every term, right? In the sense that they could explain to you what it does, but they couldn't tell you the name of it completely, right? So again, helping you figure out some of those ways for improvement. So here's, kind of that practical guidance. You do not want to know how much time I spent trying to generate this. Vocabulary was spelt wrong every single time. And then key concept was spelled. So I was like, you know what, stay with what you are. Then I tried to animate it and that didn't work out well. So then I realized, artist, your job is safer right now. Right now. But I mean, you all are familiar with this, right? Like we've talked about the Pareto principle, but we all know it, right? Like the idea is that you're not trying to fundamentally change your course. And I think sometimes, for whatever reason, we do these tear downs and rebuild it back up, right? And it's till you realize, oh, I'm really good at this part of it, right? And that's something we struggle with our assistant professors, right? They're new and they want to make these grand changes. Like I taught it this semester and I'm going to rebuild it because what I got feedback for. And it's like, but you shouldn't have got feedback for the entire course, right? Like, why are you fundamentally revising it, right? It's like most of your content is solid, right? You're trying to identify just the small pieces that you can enhance, right? And for whatever reason, the way people have been using AI is like, help me solve 100% of it, right? Instead of saying, hey, let's take a step back and think about, here's all the things that work really well in the course. Here are the things that we're going to emphasize, and we're going to change a few of those items. Because if I'm changing everything, how am I supposed to assess how I'm changing over time if I'm fundamentally rebuilding everything over, right? I ran into this with my UCore course. I went through the provost writing
Work fellows?
Yes, there we go. Yes, we went through the whole thing. My activity I created were these students create these documentaries, right? They're on YouTube, right? And they have to explain. So the whole point of it is translational research, right? It's like, how do we take concepts and break them down? So students have done things like explain CRISPR and machine learning and biometrics. Like these are really big topics. And we went through this whole activity and it created this complex problem for me, which is I had a course that I've taught for 10 years, right? And now I fundamentally changed how we assess it, right? Like the core activities they're completely different. How do I figure out a way to make those comparable, right? Are my student learning goals? What am I tapping into? So I was able to put the prior syllabi that I had in my course materials, the current one, and try to find where could I extract commonalities so that I could continue to assess the efficacy, right, of the course in the way that I'm teaching, and our students still meeting those UCourse standards, right? Again, I knew what I did really well. I knew I had a very specific problem that I was trying to resolve. So let's look for those patterns, let's look for those gaps, and let's come up with a game plan. So I saw there's a question on assessment.
There was a question. So is there an assessment method that can evaluate student performance after using the pattern analysis based on materials from the MIT course and the instructor's own class materials? And I said, do you mean an assessment method to determine which teaching approach / materials are working better? And they say maybe before and after using the pattern analysis. I'm not sure I understand the question. You might understand the question.
No,
Do you want to just unmute and ask David?
Yeah, I just wonder how effective it is pattern analysis.
No, absolutely. I think that, I mean, like all things, right, they require us to go in and validate, right? I don't take everything that I see here as proof or evidence that I should move forward. Ultimately, they're my decisions as a faculty member on what I do and don't do. Mostly, I'm trying to understand where am I spending a lot of time on? Where, do I have really good examples that I could bridge from my announcements that I'm posting and then bring that into the class, the class during a lecture? Looking at my overall course learning outcomes, right? And where does my course align to those? Like when you're filling out that document, that has been really helpful, right? Because sometimes I can't decide. It's like, well, do I have space? And that's the other thing. Put the constraints on to say, look, we have 16 weeks, but I don't have 16 weeks because you got to take this out. So finals is out, Thanksgiving is out, right? We're going to lose these number because of holidays. This is the time that I'm working with, right? Are all of these topics being discussed in a way that line up with these course outcomes? The answer, I can't say and accept as it's the truth, but I have enough subject matter expertise that I can look at that and say, yeah, this unit does, in fact, cover these particular topics. And those particular topics do align with this course learning outcome, which connects to these UCore items. I think that's part of how when I think about the pattern analysis, that's what I'm looking for, right? Not the, putting student papers in and getting back, these, particular analysis. I'm much more interested in being able to take my student feedback and then synthesize and find some of the core areas that students were struggling with, but also were excelling at, right? So I see it more as an opportunity for me to improve how I'm transmitting or translating the results of a given exam or what I'm seeing in my own analysis. So these are the constraints we talked about, right? Is sometimes you do have to put parameters. And so, we always think about limited contact hours, right? No, thank you. I love, these are all supposed to be conversations. It's like, that's the one thing I want out. By the time we get to April, everyone is just talking about this. But put your constraints, they are real, right? Yes, in an ideal world, I would have more time for my students to be able to come by. And I have tried open office hours. For me, really the only thing that's worked is I've added book with me and they can see it. And I'm like, there's my calendar, pick a time. And so that has worked out great, right? There's no more like my office hours don't work for them because they're working. And it's like, look, there's a tool, pick a time, it goes to my calendar, we meet, we're good. But that there are things that you can anticipate. Right? So when I put these constraints in my conversation in NotebookLM, I said, well, here are some of the things you could do, right? Like we could create these study guides, right? We could create a set of resources that were from like news articles, or right, like not just giving students always peer-reviewed articles. Yes, that's the gold standard, but it also is important for them to be able to review how given organizations represent the research, right? It's as important for them to see, wow, they're portraying this to be 65% of people feel this way with a margin of error of plus or minus 10%. That's right, like that's a wide variation. So helping them see how research is discussed, in my mind, is just as helpful to reinforce that critical thinking, right? Like, what are they missing? What are they not discussing? The resource limitations, I want to spend a little bit of time on that. It's a little bit towards the end, but it's documenting and using AI to help you document the challenges that you face so you can articulate it better to say, to make these changes in this course, these are the resources that I'm going to need, or this is the time that I'm going to need. I don't think we always think of it that way. So since last time folks said, give me something I could copy and paste. So here you go. These are just some starting prompts on, right? Here are things that you can start with your content, right? Relative to, okay, I want you to think like a student. Again, we're going to frame it as you're a student. Here's the background you had, and here's what I want you to focus on, right? And they're pretty straightforward, right? What 3 changes would most help my students, right? What my successful strategies are because we already started there. Where am I not weaving those into the course? Like essentially, like, what's the missed opportunity, right? Things that are overly complicated, right? There's a section in the MIT course where it's so unbelievably dense. I even asked, I was like, is this actually for undergrads? It's like, well, and then it's like the whole, like, it didn't seem, I was like, man, that's rough. There's just so much. So I really wanted to look at, okay, well, how could we better structure this? And this is, well, if we want to know if it's so dense, let's create a mind map of all of the content for that section. And then as we kept going through it, it got deeper and deeper. And we're like, oh, wow. Now we had the full picture of what the content looked like in the topics. Again, if I'm the expert, in this course I wasn't, right? But if it's my course and I'm the expert, I can tell you pretty quickly if that is valid or not, right? Are those things I'm actually going to talk about or cover in the material or not? So being able to have my teaching assistant, right, to be able to give me that feedback, or that colleague to the side that says, hey, you know, we have a good enough relationship. You can tell me and be honest if something isn't working, right? But then I can also put in and say, okay, well, here are some of the things, you know, I want to think about it from a student perspective, right? So then based on that, here are the things that we came to, which is we know that students are going to skim material, right? These are all the things that we knew to be true after going through that activity. And so here are practical things real quick, right? We would, as faculty, would say these are low effort, high impact, right? Bolding key concepts, right? In my announcements, right? Really easy to do, right? Bolding sections, right? So one of the things that I do in my courses is after every lecture, I go in, all right, that's not true. How about every week, at the end of every week, I write up a summary of all the things that we've covered, things that basically like, you know, my cliff notes of all of the course materials, right? I don't give them my lecture materials. I'm going to write up this overall summary. Great thing about it is, since I teach it every time, I just get to reuse it and I get to update it. But the ability to take those announcements, and they're pretty lengthy, and then put them in and then get all of these concepts, but also sections, right, that lined up with my some of my assessments was phenomenal. It's like, here's Dr. Macon's like cheat sheet for the course. You just got to read it, right? You know, being able to create new content, the glossary, like I always forget about it because I assume the textbook has it or they can Google it, right? But being able to provide that to them, and I was able to get it generated, and it was like, wow, that's exactly it. That's all the things that if a student reading the announcement, they might not fully understand, and then being able to have that available to them, right? And then the one that I do really well is I always take from my course, and the next day I pull forward something we just talked about, right? Right? So that they always get that. In this course, that wasn't something that was happening. At least something that it might very well happen. It just wasn't in the transcripts, right? But then the course was like the relevancy. Like, how do I make this, like, why does the course matter? Well, if you know, but you're like, man, my students aren't connecting with it, well then, what would a student connect with? How might they connect with this? What examples could I use, right? And so this is, I've always thought is a fascinating way is like, every year, students get these surveys, right? You know, and one of the things, so I was on the College of Arts and Sciences as we rebuilt the student end of course survey. One of the things we kept going back and forth on was like the purpose of it. Like, what are we trying to get out of this, right? Like, was it supposed to be like how well they liked the class, right? Like we just all these things and then all the challenges that come with it. But fundamentally, so much of what we want is like, how can I make, you know, where can I improve the course, right? How can I better engage my students? You kind of want to give them this opportunity. Well, why not, right? Like, why not have all these different students that I've created and say, help me redesign the way I introduce, thank you, right? Introduce the course, right? We don't have the ability, and we don't. Like, one of the things that I will always struggle with is student feedback, like, you know, it's kind of like a John Oliver, but boring. And I'm like, yeah, that's fair. But like, we don't have writers, right? We don't have a team of researchers, right? We don't have a teleprompter in front of us, but we've got a teaching assistant and teaching, you know, like students that can help us better understand where we excel at and where we have an opportunity for improvement. So a lot of the, what I leave you with here is like the pattern you can use, like accept the student perspective, right? And introduce it, right? Here's one of the challenges that I know to be true. Well, here's one way that I could implement. And that's, again, accept the student's perspective, right? We know these things, pass that forward, right, to my teaching assistant, look at what they're offering, and then collaborate on something that I'd like to implement, right? And so again, we're trying to develop this partnership, this tool, right? If we know that in the future, and I firmly believe every student will have a teaching assistant or a tutor, and every faculty member is going to have a teaching assistant. I believe that AI will absolutely fill that role at some point, right? So it's how do we use, right, and collaborate to create, right, new experiences for students? Because it's not to say that the old way, right, that talk and chalk pedagogy, the stage on the stage, that works for some students, right? It's worked for thousands of years for us to just throw it out and be like, yeah, AI here, right? Like, we know that it's not about changing the way that you teach, right? It's figuring out what you do really well and leaning into that, right? And then being open to learn and to adapt. So this is, again, actually, you were just talking about this, is as a department, right? We could amass what are really good prompts, right? Like, we could figure out a way to collect the evidence to ask for course releases, load adjustments, right? Because when you think about, wow, how much time it's going to take to do this, right? I really believe I'd like to implement this. Well, let's actually document all the steps that you're going to go through to do it, to make a little bit more of a compelling argument. Now, is it always going to change? No. Does it take a lot of evidence? Yes. But the more we document it and the more that we can show, implementing some of these strategies is going to take more time, right? So using it for documentation. The collaborative development is what Eric was mentioning. We could build these for our departments, right? Where we have these knowledge banks. Imagine having all these prompts that you've created, right, that are a teaching assistant that has this emphasis, a student has this emphasis. Sometimes I want a really critical student, right? Like, I want a student that doesn't believe any of this to be true, right? I sometimes want that critic, right? I mean, you get one every semester, but being able to have that opportunity to sometimes anticipate and figure out what I might be able to do, to figure out how to connect it. Those are those moments, I think, as faculty that, I don't know, that excite us, that get us interested in, continuing this good work that we do. So this week, here's what I would like people to do. We're going to start next session with you all being willing to talk and share about your experience. So figure out, what it is that you'd like to learn from. Put that material into NotebookLM, right? And if you want, we can also talk about how to do this 100% offline, right? So that you don't have to put your material there. I think at least one workshop, we should just spend time on building your own offline models. I think that would be helpful for everybody. But I really would like folks to go through this activity that we've done, and let's come back and talk about it, right? Let's look at what you've been able to create, right? I just want to hear from folks. And then for those of you that were thinking, all right, well, we just did all that work and now we want to create the video. There's your video of our effort. I'm not sharing sound, but I guess I could download this and we could share this out for those of you that are interested. So we just did all this, and there's our video. So nice collaborative effort. So thank you all. Oh, good. Fair amount stayed on through lunch and everything. It's good. Next time, again, even if it's that awkward 5 or 10 minutes of silence, my students know I'll do it. So we'll just sit here in silence till folks share what your experiences was, what the limitations were, and then we'll look at some other tools that we can use to keep just, again, improving the experience. Great. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. If you have any lingering questions, we'll be here for a few more minutes. You can certainly ask them. And the materials we'll send out, we have a record of you being here, so we can send them out to you afterward.
Yep, we'll make sure we get the Gamma is always available. I use Gamma because it was so helpful to get everything set up.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was just me. I had a lot of fun with NotebookLM.
We used to have Jana out there in Island County hanging in with us.